Today on Fresh Vintage, we're doing horsepower, intake manifold, and carburetor upgrades that have been 2 years in the making. We'll explain why. Let's get started.
All right, we're here at my car today. We're going to be replacing the intake, the carburetor, and per this fancy Chilton's manual, it starts here, and this whole paragraph describes and picture describes what it's going to take. So going by that, it should take 15 minutes, no problem. So what we're going to be replacing today is, starting from the top, we got a 650 Edelbrock carburetor and a Edelbrock air gap intake manifold, which looks all pretty in black. We've got intake gaskets, a new water outlet thermostat housing. If we have time, we'll get this powder coated, but we'll tell you about that if it happens. And new fuel line, and this is the carb mounting bolts, or these are the carb mounting bolts, sorry, and this is the new intake bolts. So the reason I'm doing this is that's the original old cast intake. This is aluminum, should allow a lot more airflow, a lot more performance. I've been kind of wanting to do this for years. So let's get started.
So real quick before we jump into this, we've already got the battery disconnected. We're not going to show you every literally nut and bolt that we disconnect and every plug wire that we pull off, but we're going to check in and show you key events along the way. We're going to start by, we got the battery disconnected like I said. We want to drain the antifreeze down so we're not gushing antifreeze when we pull this. And then we're going to start taking the wires and getting the fuel line off of here so that we can get the carburetor removed and eventually get to the intake manifold. But we'll check in periodically here with updates as we achieve key steps. So quick update here, we have pulled the wires, the actual spark plug wires. We pulled some of the coolant hoses. You see we have the hoses off here. We're getting ready to pull the distributor, and we have the very exclusive limited edition cap marking tool here. This is NYC, you probably find it on eBay or something like that. But all joking aside, it's nail polish. It'll show up maybe a little differently, a little bit better than the actual like Sharpie you would normally use. But I'm just going to do one of these deals, and then we want to mark it a second time. I'm just going to pull this and put it on the table behind me. And here, let's kind of just, I don't want to say eyeball this, because you know you're potentially going to deal with timing no matter what you do. But I'm just going to do one of these, and we'll give that a second or two to dry. And then I'm going to actually disconnect the wiring. You can see we already have the wiring off of the coil. It's over here. So we have our 1/2 inch. Break this loose. There we go. That was actually pretty loose. I'm going to pull this all the way out and cross my fingers that I should be able to wiggle this out of here. All right, big moment of truth. Just do this. Oh, yeah. Okay, so quick update. You saw we ended here where we're like, this thing's kind of stuck, and it's loose now, and we do not recommend this unless you absolutely have to. But we went from trying to He-Man it to PB Blaster to we actually gave it a little bit of taps here, just enough to get that that actual seal there to break free. But this is loose now, and let me set the tools down, and I should be able to carefully pull this out of here. There we go. There we go, success. Gear looks pretty solid, so we'll put this on the table, and we'll start working on the fuel lines and then getting the carburetor off there next. So quick update here, we have the fuel line removed, and in order to remove the fuel line, it's actually the fuel pump's right here. We had to pull the bracket out for the power steering. You can see the power steering pump laying right here. But once we did that, we did a few other little, let me set the power steering pump bracket down. A few little odds and ends. We pulled the belt off of here. The wiring was a little brittle, so we're going to have to look at that, putting this back together. But we disconnected the actual throttle linkage right here. and then I pulled the actual nuts off of the carburetor, and there's a couple hoses here. We're going to look at the new Edelbrock because I'm not 100% sure that the new hoses are even, spots for them to go into the carburetor, but we haven't taken this off, so I'm going to pull this off of here live right now. And I feel something, a gasket, there we go. There's our carburetor. So I will put this on the bench and then we'll start investigating the intake manifold bolts next. Okay, so the moment you've all been waiting for, we have this loose, and what I did is I took our pry bar, and it's kind of hard to see under here, but I got it underneath here on the actual engine block. And no, like I said, do this at your own risk, but I pried on the inlet here, knowing we're going to replace this. And it didn't take that much effort. I gave it a little bit of English, so to speak, and it popped free. But let me put the bar down here, and in theory, I'm hoping I can come over here and grab this. There we go. Let me actually come to the side of the car. This weighs a bit more than I thought it did. And there we go, folks. We are back in the garage with our 65 Mustang GT. We went to Hyperfest. If you haven't seen our videos, definitely check that out on Hyperfest. You can see we have done some scraping and we have the ports all plugged up there. But we have our new Edelbrock's performance gaskets. We have our Permatex, and we also have some high-tack gasket sealant. So we're going to get these situated on here, read the instructions, because believe it or not, these actually fit 63 to 96, which I was surprised that it covers that much. But we're going to read through the instructions and get these set on there, and then we'll show you an update. So in laying the new intake manifold gaskets down, we noticed specifically here, and it's on the back as well, but we don't have to worry about the back because the new intake effectively blocks the back ports off. But the front coolant ports actually have a piece of the gasket that's going to basically sit there and disintegrate with hot coolant over time. So what we did is we actually cut the piece out of there, and feel free to leave us a comment saying we did a terrible job and stuff, but we did that so that we didn't eventually have pieces of the gasket disintegrating in the actual coolant system. And something else we're doing is we have this piece here, and you want to make sure you install these like this, because otherwise you potentially could have your coolant leaking into your actual intake manifold bolts. But we're going to go ahead and get this all tacked down, and the next time you see this, in theory, we should have it ready to drop the intake on. So real quick, wanted to point out, we cut both intake gaskets on the front port. On the back, the intake effectively blocks that coolant port off in the back of the engine. But we cut that off so it wasn't in the coolant. And then we're just using the actual Permatex gasket sealant here just to throw some on the head. And then on the fender, we're going to jump over to the actual intake gasket. We're just going to put it on this side real quick, and then probably the next shot you see will be us putting the intake on. So Jay went out and got himself an Edelbrock RPM air gap, specifically finished in black. Looks really cool, and we're going to drop it in here. A few quick things. I went and cleaned the mating surfaces, and we have everything all tacked up with the gasket paint, so to speak, here. And then we have our TV here. You want to make sure it's touching the intake gaskets on the front and back. But here's the moment of truth. And I will say, if you ever do this for your own car, this is certainly lighter than the one that came off the car. We want to drop this on here pretty much perfectly level. That's going to be the hardest part here. And now is not a time for a fly to be bugging me. Just some side commentary. There we go. Well, I think that looks good. We're going to double check the front two holes here lined up, so I'm just going to get a flashlight and just spot check every single hole, but I think that dropped on there quite nicely. It cleared the distributor hole here, so we'll double check it, and then we'll start getting the carburetor to put on. So a quick update here. We have the intake on, and you can see we have 12-point head bolts. These are 12 spline bolts, so to speak. And we got the hookup from Harbor Freight. We stopped by Harbor Freight. They had 12-point sockets. It's a 5/16 head on those, so that was awesome. We found those. And forgive me for griping for a moment about Edelbrock, but I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you, Edelbrock, in the video right here, right now. You built this intake, and you built these bolts. There's the bolt part number. And so why are we having nice flat washer distribution here, but we have this going on here, and this one's not even trying? So what we're going to do is, since I'm from Pennsylvania and I'm a redneck, I'm going to fix this with the grinder. So we're going to do that right now, and then we're going to get these bolted down and torqued to 18 to 20 foot-pounds. All right, let's take care of this washer right now. So we have our intake in and the actual intake bolts, and you saw we were grinding the custom washers here, so to speak. And real quick, here's our actual tightening sequence, and these need to be at 18 to 20 foot-pounds. So let's grab our torque wrench and, oh, wait a minute, where's the torque wrench? We got our master crew chief here bringing it in. Thank you very much, sir, appreciate it. Make sure you get your kids involved in what we're doing here, folks. We're only one generation away from this being an EV, and nobody wants to work on it. So we need to keep this performance going on in our lives for the next generation. 18 to 20 foot-pounds, this is an inch-pound, so we need to times everything by 12. But we're going to go ahead and set this for probably the high end, probably 240 inch-pounds, so to speak. But we'll tighten this down in the sequence, and then we'll work on getting the carb out of the box next. So real quick, just wanted to point out the tightening sequence here. It'll probably vary depending on what Edelbrock intake you have, but we have a 1/2 inch drive. We're looking to hit 20 foot-pounds. The window is 18 to 20 foot-pounds. And we're gonna go 20 foot-pounds because we know we're gonna lose a little bit of torque through the adapter here. But we won't show you every single one, but we just wanted to comment, and as I do this, we just wanted to comment that your gaskets are compressing here, so have some patience, and eventually you get to the point where you'll actually hit that 20 foot-pounds of torque. But we had to do this probably 4 or 5 times before we actually got the gaskets compressed enough to where we could actually hit that 18 to 20 foot-pound window. So we're going to finish this, and then we're going to work on getting the carburetor out of the box next. So we have our new Edelbrock. This is a 1406 4-barrel 650 CFM carburetor. We have the studs. They're actually separate from the intake, so we put them on, put the gasket on. So I'm going to make sure I didn't touch anything under here. That all looks good. And I'm just going to drop this on right now. There we go. There's 2 holes. You can see they have it set up for different intakes, but these take the 2 outer holes on the front and back. So real quick, we wanted to mention more silliness from Edelbrock here. Forgive my sarcasm, but the nuts here, you can see, in theory, you should be able to turn them, but they actually hit the back of the bowl here on both sides. So we had to lift the carburetor up to the top of the studs so that we could actually get the nuts on the back side and spin them down as we lowered the carburetor. The front side, we didn't have that problem. So the front side's got plenty of room. So we have a 1/2 inch box wrench here, and this says just tighten down diagonally until they're snug, and then go a little bit tighter beyond that. And it also says do not over tighten because you'll break the base. Sorry, I can't see from this angle. You will break the base and void your warranty. But we're going to crank these down, and then we'll start putting everything else back together. So we did a bunch of stuff since the last time we checked in. Starting off with, this is the adapter that came out of the mechanical fuel pump. The old fuel line, this is actually a compression fitting in there. We replaced it with this fitting from O'Reilly's. The one that's in the car already is in there. Then some fuel line. So we took that and we routed it. If you look down in here, we took that and routed it through the actual power steering pump bracket, the gap there, because we didn't want to get it any closer than we absolutely had to the exhaust manifold. But we're going to eventually hook it up. Our fuel inlet is over here. And a few other things we've done is we have the new housing here with the thermostat inside, and then we put a new Autolite hose on here with some hose clamps, and we put the belt back on, and from here we're going to start putting the ignition coil on and drop the distributor in pretty soon. Quick note on the plugs, this is like a universal but not universal intake, you may have to plug a few ports. And in this case, I'd use this adapter. This comes with the intake manifold, and this plug here. And then on the back side here, let me jump over, show you. On the back side here, we have this as well. Then there's one back here. Don't forget about this guy, because this thing will not run right. You'll have a huge intake leak, and it's there's a port back here you have to plug up. And one more thing, the thing that we're working on now is the throttle, trying to get the throttle back together. This adapter and piece comes with the intake kit. So we're just trying to get the actual fitment together here so that when we hit the gas pedal, the throttle actions. So we're back at it here, and three quick things we wanted to point out to you. One, we noticed that we had this blocked off, and we were like, oh, where does this heater hose go, this water hose go? And we realized that we needed to pull this out of the old intake, so definitely make sure you spot check that and do that as needed, because you definitely need this heater hose and the water supply to go somewhere into the intake. Looking at the distributor, it is in, you can see it's loose. We have the hold down here. And we wanted to point out our special tool. This is a Ford special tool called Wendy's Straw. And what I mean is the oil pump shaft, if you start thinking about going straight down through the distributor, that oil pump shaft would not sit and seat properly. There's a hex on either end, and one of those hexes has to go into the very bottom shaft of the distributor, and the other one has to go down into the oil pump drive itself. And this was the only thing we found that fit over that hex head perfectly and give it just enough friction so you could pick it up and move it and then twist it off of there. So if you're doing something like this and you're messing with the distributor, this actually is a really handy tool, because it was the perfect tool that gave just the right diameter and just enough friction to let you maneuver that thing and then drop it down into that hex slot. Once we had that in place, the distributor actually dropped into where it needed to be. So we have it in here. You can see the pump is engaged. And then from here, we are actually working on the actual throttle linkage. Looking here, we have a Summit linkage, and we'll put the part number for this on the screen. We have it set to the same number of turns as close as possible, and so this effectively is the same length as the old one. The reason we had to go out and buy this one is right here, this old one, the original OEM one, doesn't have threads and a nut on it, and that's what you need to actually get down into here. It's literally a simple matter of putting it in that side and then putting the nut on this side to keep it hooked up and connected to the throttle on the actual carburetor. But we'll throw these part numbers on the screen, and we'll also put them in the description of the video. And with that, we're going to start tinkering with and putting the throttle linkage together. And then from there, we got to put the cap and the actual rotor on, get the plugs all set up, and then work on timing. So quick recap, we are almost ready to fire this up. The spark plug wires, we got to do a little bit more management of those, but we do have them on there. We have the distributor on here, and it's loose, so we can time this. We believe we have it timed properly. And we have our vacuum line here. If you do this, remember that this is your intake, like vacuum for your distributor. This is a constant vacuum. This will change when you hit the throttle, so you can adjust the timing with the distributor. We also have our fuel line set up with a fuel filter. This the manual actually says you'll void the warranty on the carb if you don't have a fuel filter, so we installed that. You can see it is empty, so we're going to prime this here very shortly. But other little odds and ends, we have to order a new one of these because this was originally a California car, so this is California emissions, and we don't need this, so we're going to get one of these like minus or deleted off of this. And we have the ignition coil back in. Pretty much, we're just going to throw some antifreeze in this and maybe double check the oil real quick. Then we're going to hit the key and get it running. All right, man, let it rip. Fourth time's a charm, right? So we figured out that the wires were basically on backwards because this rotates counterclockwise. So keep that in mind if you do this. We fixed them all, so fingers crossed it fires up right now. So you just heard it running. It was awesome. A few quick things we wanted to point out, and this will definitely make a difference between it running and not running. So I originally read 3/16 time vacuum here on the left side of the carburetor, but this is for emissions, and this is for non-emissions vehicles. So if you have a 65 Mustang GT like we do, you do not have emissions, so you want to actually hook this vacuum up to your distributor, not this one. But once we figured that out, we also reread the instructions, and we found out that this is running counterclockwise on the distributor. We didn't notice that at first, so we actually fixed our wires, and then it actually fired right up. It runs pretty solid. A few things we got to finish up. We have to wire up the electric choke, and we have to actually time it. We have our timing gun here. On the back of the carburetor, there is a 1/4-inch hole for brake booster port, and we don't actually have a brake booster here, so we have a gigantic vacuum leak back here. There's an actual 1/4-inch plug that comes with the carburetor, and we actually plugged that in there and tightened it up so it's sealed up, no vacuum leak. But a few other odds and ends, we found a coolant leak that on the actual inlet that we have to fix. But yeah, it runs and drives, and definitely you can do this. To have some patience. It took us probably 5-ish weeks in between car shows and doing other stuff for Fresh Vintage. But yeah, we got it up and running, and at the tail end of the video here, we're going to do some rolling shots of this guy and maybe a burnout or something, so stay tuned. All right, so wrapping up version 2.0. I know we said we're going to wrap up before, but we're actually going to wrap up because we're done. We're finally done. A few things that we did. This has an electric choke, so we had to wire this through the actual firewall to a keyed hot ignition wire, and we'll show you the hole in the firewall in a second here. This thermostat housing was a little bit more of an issue than we thought. If you buy one of these kits for your Mustang or small block Ford, just have some patience with this because we ended up having to goop it. There's an O-ring in there, but I was surprised that no matter how hard we tighten this, knowing this is aluminum, it just wouldn't stop leaking. So we had to goop it, but it seems to be, knock on wood, so to speak, it seems to be good. And coming around the other side of the car, one of the other things we did is Jay found this really nice throttle return spring kit, and it bolts right onto the intake, and it allows for some nice travel, and it returns. We were having issues with other springs. They weren't actually returning all the way, or the ones that were returning all the way were so tight, they're gonna break. But this is that hole we found back here. Really nice, convenient hole for the electric choke hot wire. And with that, we're actually gonna go for a ride now, but we just want to say thank you for watching, and thanks for taking this journey with us. You too can be a certified Fresh Vintage mechanic. Just join us here with all of our repairs. And with that, let's jump right into the Mustang. We'll go for a ride right now. If you like classic cars, if you like muscle cars, if you like big horsepower, if you like Mustangs and Chargers and Chevelles, all the rest, Fresh Vintage is your channel. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.